I must say it's very odd doing it this way. In some ways it's quite nice. Will, you're not shouting out at me. I don't have to worry about that, do I, Will? Also, there's no kind of questions or rebound. It's quite odd. Hopefully, though, I help you get through the work. But like I said, any questions, just ask at any point. Okay, periodisation. So, periodisation is basically creating a training program. Now at GCSE, you made a training program. You created a log. It was part of your coursework. We never called it this though. Right. So periodisation is the official name for the building blocks of a training program. Now, if you consider your season, now I've just gone with like what have I gone with? This is an athletics season. Okay, so starting in April time is when the main season kicks off. It goes through to sort of end of September. Now, every sport has an off-season, a pre-season, an in-season, and then an active rest. Okay, every sport has these. Now, if we were doing a hockey, rugby, or football season, it would just shift. It would start in August, and it would go all the way through to kind of May. So it would just be a slightly different picture. But if we look at, it's these two lines that are the most important two lines. Okay, so duration. Duration is the duration of your activity that you're doing in each of the phases. So in off season, the duration should be quite long. And then as you come down, the duration's starting to decrease in pre-season. Okay, and then you're not doing as much training in the in-season. And then as we increase and we go into the off season, we're going to up it again. But what does increase is your intensity that you're working at. Okay, so here you might be doing really slow runs because your intensity is low, but as you get closer and closer to the competition season, your intensity should be coming up to kind of your match intensity, race intensity, etc. So you build it. If we started up here in our off season with high intensity, we'd likely to get injured because we wouldn't have kind of warmed our muscles up and got our muscles ready for in here. So you have to do it on a gradual basis, and then during the rest you drop it back down again. Okay, so you have your active rest, so you're still taking part of the activity. Now what sometimes happen here is athletes move into maybe a different sport. Footballers go into golf. It used to be that you used to go kind of football, cricket, rugby, tennis, something like that. Now obviously the whole thing's become an entire year process. But what we're going to do is look at how we build these different phases. So, phases of training. So if we go back to here, we've got different sections to a training program. Whatever your sport is, you've got different sections. And then what I want you to do in a minute is obviously you're filling in your booklet as you're going through this, pausing it, filling it in, but also I want you to try and draw up something of your own kind of training program. So whether that be netball, athletics, swimming, hockey, tennis, whatever. Okay, I want you to draw up your own in a minute. But, okay, so we have different phases of training that you should consider, and you probably do already, but you just don't know the names of them. So, we've got our off season, which is actually called our prep phase 1. Okay, so this is about just developing and maintaining base fitness, normally aerobic, okay, with a little bit of strength and conditioning. So it's just prepping the body, it's making sure the body is ready for you to increase the intensity. So that's in your off season. So that might be you're doing a different sport. Pre-season is when you come back into your sport and you start to increase the intensity of the training. Now, it's normally pre-season is fitness based. Okay, so you're building and building and building. Then it becomes sport specific. So you start with fitness based, then becomes sport specific. Then we end up in our competitive phase, and that's your season, that's your league season. So football, August through to May, hockey, similar season, rugby, similar season. Okay, so you should be reducing your training. Why? Because obviously, if you're training at a really high intensity and then loads of training, you're going to be really tired for your match days, which is where you then get the results from. So in here, the training becomes far more tactical based in your competitive phase, set plays, specific kind of looking at your back four in football, or looking at your short corners in hockey, or looking at your rucks and mauls within rugby. Okay, so it becomes far more specific to the game and not necessarily fitness based. Then you've got a tapering phase. Okay, so competitive phase 4, tapering phase. Now this could be, obviously you can't do this week in, week out, but it could be that you've qualified for a cup final at the end of the season and it's in 2 weeks' time once the season's finished. You can then have that prep phase, getting you ready for this cup final. Then we've got our active rest. Okay, so this is where your season finishes and then you stop. Now active rest could be just low intensity aerobic work. It could be treatment for any injuries, so it could be rehab, it could be physio, just to try and get rid of any injuries that you did have. So it's kind of like a safety net at the end of the season of trying to get you ready to go back into your off season, and then the cycle starts again. Okay, so if we went through let's go for a rugby example. The off season is July. Okay, so in July the rugby players are kind of having a holiday, they're doing a little bit of aerobic work. Then they come back into kind of August pre-season and kind of the end of July. This might be June and July, this might be kind of July and August pre-season fitness-based training. Then we go from sort of August, September all the way through to April time of these 2 phases with some cup finals at the end. And then May, active rest, kind of recover from any injuries that they've had. Right then, so periodisation. Periodisation is the organised division of different training into a number of specific blocks. So it's creating a goal. Here's where we start. Here's where we want to finish. And then it's how do we go along that timeline to get to here. Okay, so it's going from here to here, and you've got to build it up. If I just said to you, I want to get you from here to here, and I gave you, imagine that we're going for a road trip. We're starting at school. And I've told you to get to the Scottish Highlands, but I've given you no information to get there, the chances are slim. Whereas if I give you little building blocks and I give you, right, your first step is Ringwood, your second step is Southampton, and I give you little steps, you can get to those little steps to allow you to achieve your full end goal. And that's what periodisation is all about, is putting little building blocks over and over and over again to allow you to get to your end result. So, how you progressively develop your training. So it's building it, making sure you use the principles of training, the rules to allow you to get there. Having a training program, building up to the Olympic Games. So, Jessica Ennis, well not Jessica Ennis, well we could use Jessica Ennis but she's retired, but let's say Jessica Ennis has an aim for 2020 Olympics. She won't be in 2020 Olympics. Number 1, it'll probably be cancelled. Number 2, she's retired. We won't worry about that though. So, she's got an aim of winning a gold medal. Okay, and it's in July, and she's made this decision in July 2019. She's got 1 year. Okay, so 1 year is a macro cycle. 1 long year plan of winning gold medal at the Olympic Games. What we need to do is split this into little mesocycles and then little microcycles. And I'm going to explain those a lot more, but what we're starting to do is split up her cycle already. So what's a macrocycle? So a macrocycle normally is a year. You could have 6 months, but it's normally a year. You can also have a megacycle, which is a 4-year process. Now, think about the sports that have a 4-year cycle. Olympics, Commonwealth Games, World Championships, Football World Cup, Rugby World Cup. They all have a 4-year cycle. So the Rugby World Cup's just finished. Well, 2019 it finished. Now, the England rugby team would be preparing for the next 4 years' time. So the coaches would already be thinking for 4 years' time. So that's a mega cycle that sits over the top of it all. Then you have a macro cycle, so a 1-year cycle. So 1 year cycles, all the seasons that we do, rugby, football, hockey, netball, tennis, etc., all have a 1 year cycle. They all change every year. Okay, so everybody should have a goal that is a year long. We want to finish second in the league this year. We want to make Champions League qualification. We want to win the league this year. Okay, that should be your goal. So that's your mega cycle, or no, macro cycle, sorry. Then we have a mesocycle. Now, mesocycles are the little blocks that allow us to complete our macro cycle. So we've got macro cycles sitting across the top, and we then build little blocks into the mesocycles. Now, natural mesocycles, off-season, pre-season, competitive season, active rest. Okay, they are examples of mesocycles. So, a mesocycle is normally 1 to 4 months. Macrocycles consist of sort of 3 to 4 mesocycles normally. Okay, so like I said, off, pre, competitive, active rest. Each mesocycle is then divided into microcycles. And then you can split each one into different microcycles or different mesocycles as well, sub-mesocycles. Now we'll go through those. Okay, so here we go. Macrocycle, 1 year long, split into different mesocycles. Then we sub-split them again into smaller mesocycles. Okay, so here's our pre-season. We split it into 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Now, mesocycle 1 in pre-season, this 1.1 is just going to focus on our basic fitness. So it's welcome back to the activity. Right, let's get going. So it's let's build our body back up. 1.2, we're going into specific event. Okay, so we're starting to look at tactics, positional play, like what key components of fitness do you use in your position? So cardiovascular endurance, or is it agility? Is it speed? Is it strength? Then we've got pre-competition phase. So this is now tactics, set plays. Okay, so we've gone build our basic fitness, improve specific fitness. Now let's get ready for the event. Then we have our competition, which we split again, and then we've got our off-season, rest and recovery and low-level training. So as you can see, we split our big macro cycle. So I want to finish the league in first position. We split it down into subsections throughout the year so that we can achieve certain goals. Why do we do that? Okay, so what's the reasoning of splitting this cycle? A year is a long way to look ahead. Okay, so you've got to go from there to winning the league takes an awful lot of planning. If we split it into little sections, then what we can do is complete that section, tick it off, move on to the next one. So we build our blocks. Okay, so remember these are all building blocks to create this. If we just had this, we'd get bored, we'd get tired, we wouldn't know if we were achieving our goals as we went along, we'd probably give up, which means we wouldn't win the league. Okay, so you've got to do it in stages. Okay, then we move into our microcycles. Now the microcycles are probably the things that you as athletes deal with more than the macrocycle or the mesocycles. Macro and mesocycles are normally created by your coach. Microcycles are normally created by your coach as well, but you actually do the microcycles day in, day out. So they're the ones that you are performing over and over and over again. Okay, so it depends on your relationship with the coach and to whether they've explained how they've kind of designed your training program and why they're doing what they're doing. The whole periodization model should be a conversation between the performer and the coach, because you're trying to create it so that everybody's embedded into it. But a lot of the times it's just the coach draws up something and tells the athlete what to do. Right, microcycles. So these are the short-term plans. Okay, these are what we're going to improve on the ground with sort of 1 to 3 weeks of work. Normally just 1 week. We do this week, we move on. We do this week, we move on. So here's an example. So just 1 week. This is what you're going to be doing throughout the week. This is what your weekly schedule looks like. So your coach might hand you a weekly schedule and say, right, you've got to do this, 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 and this. All professional performers should have a weekly schedule of Mondays this, Tuesdays this, Wednesdays this, so they can see what they've got to do. Now, microcycles will change. If we go back to here, okay, so within here, 1.1 of our mesocycle, it was about a basic fitness plan. Now, let's say this is 4 weeks long. Okay, so this is 4 weeks one, just this section here. So we've got 4 microcycles. Microcycle 1 in week 1 might literally just be low level, low intensity aerobic work. Week 2 could be a slight increase in that, so we start to add in some more anaerobic work. Week 3 could be that we're starting to bring in some sprints and work at a higher intensity, and we're also increasing the duration that we're running for. Okay, so it can change within here. Then obviously this becomes specific, so maybe we're trying to improve our strength, so then we add in the weights work. This one is set plays, so week 1 might be defensive set plays, week 2 could be attacking set plays, week 3 could be whole team set plays. Okay, so you can kind of put in lots of different micro performances. Now in each one you have these different ones. Now I'm not going to talk through all of them, you've got this on the PowerPoint, you can go through and add this into it. Okay, but it's basically talking about what you would do in each subsection. So these are our mesocycles that I've just talked about before, in pre-season, in competition season, so maintaining, monitoring, and then in our off-season what we do. Okay, so you've got this PowerPoint that you can work through to fill in your booklet, and it's just knowing what the different mesocycle sections are. Okay, so this is a kind of a well-documented example of a rugby periodisation model. Okay, so it's a full-on model looking at how many weeks in each mesocycle. So here's our macro cycle all the way across the top. We've then split it into different mesocycles. Okay, so my phone keeps going off. It's just so we're starting here. Week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so we're going to start here, and we know it's off season. Off season, pre-season, and we're going into our competition season. So off season, it's mesocycle 1. It's all about general preparation, and it's about hypertrophy. So we're off season, we're starting into pre-season, it's getting the body ready, and we're looking at hypertrophy of the body. We've got no fixtures. Okay, the intensity, you can see it starts off really low intensity. We don't want to have any injuries. They've just come off season where their intensity was really low. If we suddenly shot into this sort of intensity, then we'd have an injury. So we build our intensity. Intensity drops here because maybe we're doing some weight work or something like that. Okay, and then we build it up. Volume, so how much are we doing? We're doing it a lot. Okay, we're working at low intensity, but we're doing it a lot of times. And you can see that it matches. Okay, so if our intensity goes up, the volume tends to drop. If the intensity drops down, the volume goes up. Okay, because if you're working at a low volume, you should be doing a lot of exercise. If you're working at a high volume, then obviously you don't do as much exercise. So up here, we're working at a really high intensity, but we're not doing it as much. Because if we do it too often, we're going to get injured. Working at high intensity leads to fatigue, tiredness, so you're unable to work at that high intensity for a long duration. Then it's got in here kind of what you're aiming to do. Okay, what you're actually doing. Testing. Are we testing? Yes, we are. Okay, so we need to be testing as in our off season to see where we are, so that we can then retest. We've got a mid-season test. Okay, we've got a pre-season test, so it's making sure that we are set, and then it's got the individual goals. Okay, so a rugby coach would design this, or a coach of any sport would design this, but would also should let the players know, so that they can then embed everything and they have knowledge of what they're trying to do over the year. So why do we do all this planning? Why do we want to have this training program sorted? Well, it helps prevent overtraining. Okay, it should be if we stick to our guidelines and we've planned it out well, it should prevent the overtraining, which should prevent the injury, which then would stop reversibility coming into play. It allows recovery because you have set rest days. So you know if you're working at a really low intensity, you can actually do it more often. If you're working at a high intensity, you need more rest days, so you then change it. You can have your rest days in there. Each block is designed on specific fitness components. So you work out, you make it very specific to the sport. We talk about all those Mrs. Vop. You make it specific. So you know what the sport entails. You know what movement patterns are needed. You know how long you're going to be running for. You know what direction you're going to be running in. So it is linked directly to that. Maintains motivation. avoids boredom and overtraining. So because you're changing things, because the player or the coach can see exactly where you're going next, you know what you've got to do, which means it allows you to become motivated. Instead of just having that huge goal at the top again, going from here to here, you actually have subsections. You go, yep, brilliant, tick that off, I've made that, achieved that mesocycle, move on to the next one. You can change intensity because it's split into blocks. If you're going through it and you're finding it really easy, the coach and you can have a discussion and say, right, well, let's up the intensity a little bit, let's up the time, let's up the duration. You can change it to prevent board burnout. So if you are struggling and intense training is too hard and it's not going right at the moment, you can stop and pause. Monitor, so we showed the testing that was on the large one. So you can test, you can see whether you're achieving your short-term goals. And hopefully, the whole idea of the whole thing is to allow you to perform at your maximum at the point that you require it. And that might be that actually you peak and trough, because you might have a championship here and an Olympic Games here. So you peak for these and you come back down and then you peak for the Olympic Games. But the end result is, whatever your long-term goal is where you should peak for to reach the top. Okay? Right, so that's periodisation, that's modelling. What I want you to do is, you've got the booklet that I want you to have filled in with the information. Okay, so use this video, use the Everlearner to fill in the book that you had, but I also want you to create a training program for your sport. Okay, so months along the top. So Alan, basketball, Jess, tennis, Izzy, netball, Ella, athletics, Will, athletics, Dan, hockey. Who have I forgotten? Ollie, netball. Anybody else I've forgotten? No. So, do yours along here. Weeks, mesocycles, what phase you're in, what training phases that you're going to be doing. Don't worry about the fixtures. Intensity and volume I want you to do, but don't worry about doing the graphs. Just say whether it's going to be a high, low or medium intensity that you'll be working at within the phases. Okay, don't worry about the peaking. Tell me when you're going to test. Okay, so you'll create one of these for your sport. None of you are doing rugby, but obviously your hockey, Dan, will be similar to this. Netball will be similar to this. The only thing you've got with netball that you need to take into consideration is we're going to do it for a professional player. Okay, so netball has your normal season and then it has the franchise league as well. Okay, so actually it will have a double system in it. Okay, so that's what I want you to have a look at and perform. So you've got to fill in the booklet and create one of these for your sport. But like I said, you don't have to like do all the bars and things like that. Just kind of write high, low, medium. Any questions, I'll be on Teams and email so that you can then get in contact and ask any questions that you've got. Good job, first lesson done. I will leave this for today's and tomorrow's lesson. Okay, so it's 2 lessons worth of content that you've got in here. There will be an exam question that will come with it as well. All right, well done team. See you later.